Hello, I'm Elizabeth Rennie, Editor-in-Chief here at ASCM, and welcome to this ASCM session with the President and CEO of WinCup, Michael Winters. WinCup is a manufacturer of disposable polystyrene cups, bowls, containers, straws, and lids, and the company is dedicated to environmental sustainability and ensuring their products have a positive impact on our planet. So today we're going to explore WinCup's real-world strategies for building sustainability into a supply chain. So thank you for sharing these insights with us, Michael.
I'm glad to be here and definitely looking forward to the discussion today.
Perfect. So to start out, I would just like to understand what drove WinCup to start developing a biodegradable plastic strategy?
Well, I think it started about 10 years ago or so. We started taking a look at the market and the disposable products out in the market. A number of years ago, we really didn't see too many products that were focused on providing an end-of-life solution. And quite frankly, we felt that left a fairly significant opening for us to jump into that space and start creating new products. What we knew was that the brunt of our business were cups and containers, and we knew that cups and containers ended up in landfills for the most part. So we started working on how could we create an end-of-life story once they ended up in a landfill.
So what was the first product that you came up with that strategy in mind?
Yeah, so I think becoming part of the solution, not part of the problem, was our overall strategy. So we owned a chemical company at the time, and we had some really smart PhDs that worked for us from a scientific standpoint, and we also got some PhDs from Georgia Tech to come in and help with us. We're corporately headquartered in the Atlanta area, and what was really unique about the brainstorming that took place among the scientists was they developed a theory and a strategy of how we could create a foam cup that would actually biodegrade once it got to a landfill. So what we did was we actually developed the strategy, developed the product, made the product, and then we sent it to a certified laboratory testing environment to start measuring the off gas of this product as it started to break down. And the first reading that we got was about an 8% biodegradation reading after about 70 days, and then it moved to 11% and then to 19%. And when it got to about the 20% level, we got really all the smart people back in a room together, the PhDs, and basically said, what do we have here? Is this product going to continue to degrade or not? And my question to the group was, can we make a linear projection? And we could not make a linear projection. We had to be patient and let the test play out. So after 4 years, the product biodegraded 92% in the biologically active landfill, and therefore the world's first biodegradable foam cups and containers were created.
Very interesting. So the other side of that coin is that some critics do argue that we should be banning foam cups in order to reduce our pollution problem. So what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think bans aren't the solution, right? Better products are. So I think we have to take that approach. When you also take a look at the total carbon footprint discussion of this story, if you look at how foam cups are made versus other substrates like paper cups, there's 50% less energy to make a foam cup versus a paper cup. There's 30 to 50% less water usage making a foam cup versus a paper cup. There's 46% less greenhouse gas emissions making a foam cup versus a paper cup. You look at landfill consumption. Foam only takes up 1 to 1.5% of landfill space, where paper cups and paper products make up 15 to 20% of landfill space. So when you look at those facts, it's kind of hard to say foam should be banned. It definitely has a much lower carbon footprint story, or a much better carbon footprint story than paper cups do. And then you start looking at the performance of those products. Foam products perform so much better than their alternatives. It keeps drinks hotter for longer or colder for longer, and that's why consumers love foam cups so much.
All right, so when I was doing my research, I read a lot about your end of life strategy and your environmental initiatives. One of the things I also came across, of course, in 2018, there was a viral picture that went all over the internet, the turtle with the straw caught in its nose. And that actually, really upset a lot of people, and it really started a movement toward finding new solutions to address this plastics problem. So how did this affect your end of life strategy and sort of the goals for what you're doing?
Yeah, great question, Elizabeth. Really, in 2018, a number of things took place. I think from a supply chain standpoint, we started actually seeing more and more questions coming back to us from our customers about what our sustainability practices were as a corporation. We, in turn, started questioning our suppliers more and more. So that whole shift in paradigm seemed like it started picking up a lot of momentum in 2018 relative to sustainability and supply chain. The other thing that really started picking up was we started seeing more and more product demands for eco-friendly products. And as you mentioned, the video of the turtle with a straw stuck in his nose. We have a lot of customers come to us and ask us what other type of substrates could we manufacture straws out of that would be more eco-friendly. Well, we took a look out there, and really there was only a couple substrate offerings. There was a paper straw was an option, and what's called a PLA straw is an option. PLA is a starch that comes from potato starch or corn starch. And we knew that paper straws did not have a very good consumer reaction to them. They get soggy and they collapse, and they just don't really work real well. And PLA straws was very narrow in scope in terms of its environmental attributes. It will only degrade or compost in an industrial composting facility. So we didn't like either one of those solutions. So we kept searching the worldwide for the new substrate that could maybe really become a household name and a much better solution. So we started investigating. We found a company called Danimer Scientific and became partners with Danimer Scientific into a substrate called PHA. So it's a very up-and-coming substrate that is going to be here for the years to come.
So tell me about that. How does it work, and how are you using it in your products?
Sure. So PHA, the feedstock for PHA comes from canola oil, like cooking oil, right? So a lot of restaurants use cooking oil for French fries or chicken or whatever they're cooking in their kitchen. And so PHA uses this canola oil to feed it to bacteria. The bacteria stores the canola oil as energy reserves. These energy reserves are then harvested, and thus PHA is created. What makes this substrate so unique is how quickly it will biodegrade and compost in almost any environment. So the material from which our Fade straws are made is certified as marine biodegradable, soil biodegradable, home compostable, and industrial compostable. So not only does it have the sustainable ingredient, because canola plants are grown, it's a crop, so it's definitely a sustainable product, and it has incredible biodegradable attributes to it. We really believe that this substrate is a meaningful solution to traditional petroleum-based products that are out there in the market today.
So what other innovations are you exploring? I know I read about something called Fade. So what else are you doing with PHA? And tell us a little bit about Fade too.
Yeah, so let me talk to you a little bit more about Fade. So Fade is our first entry into the PHA world. Fade is our straws and stirrers that have all of those nice attributes that I just mentioned a second ago. And the unique thing about Fade is when we launched it to the world back, we originally announced it in Q4 of 19 at the NACS convention, which is the largest convenience store show in the industry. And there was thousands and thousands of suppliers at this show and tens of thousands of products at this show. And every manufacturer that was there and every customer was there got to go throughout the show and vote on what was the coolest new green item introduced at the show. And our little blue straw ended up with the Blue Ribbon Award as the cool new green item of the show. So that was in the fall of 19, preceding our launch. Our launch did not take place until mid-2020, right in the middle of a pandemic, right? What a better time to launch a new product than a pandemic. So we actually thought about holding off our launch, but we had so many customers asking for us to go ahead and launch this product that we did decide to launch. So the product launched in July of 2020, and in August of 2020, we were named the 2020 Innovation in Bioplastics Award by the Plastics Association, along with our work with Danimer Scientific. So I think those two things, being named the #1 cool new item, green item at the NACS convention, and then winning the 2020 Innovation Award in Bioplastics, it really made us step back for a second and think about what we had here. I've been in the consumer products business for about 35 years, and I've launched a lot of products throughout my career, and I really haven't launched one that is this exciting, that has this much potential room to advance. And it's a really a pretty neat story in terms of where PHA can go in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned being in CPG for a long time. So when you think about the launch, what were the biggest supply chain challenges that you faced and some lessons learned and how you overcame them?
Yeah, so from a supply chain standpoint, whenever you're launching, especially a brand new substrate that has no track record, that there aren't 10 suppliers to go pick from, you really have to do your due diligence on the supplier itself. So we spent an enormous amount of time investigating the supply chain from the world of PHA. There were limited suppliers globally that were working on this substrate. We did parallel paths with a couple of them. At the end of the day, we made sure that the supplier we chose was the real deal, that they had the right funding in place to expand, that they already had capital plans in place for the expansions that they planned to go forward with. We also wanted to make sure that any product claims that they were letting us know about, that they had been third-party verified and third-party certified, because that's the really critical key whenever you're coming with an eco-friendly products, is that the consumers can trust what you're telling them about your product out there. So really assessing that supply chain from the supplier standpoint was really key. We also had to do very much of a deep dive internally at our entire supply chain group to make sure that we had high performance talent on that team. We were launching into a brand new substrate that we believed would take off like a rocket because of how unique it was. So we had to start at the leadership level and get the right leadership involved in running our supply chain organization. So we made a change at the top of our supply chain group with a very competent leader who had great skill sets in all of the traditional supply chain elements out there. We also had to, quite frankly, upgrade our purchasing organization so that we could assess suppliers quickly and hold them accountable to be nimble and quick and react quickly. The other thing, because this substrate, the demand expectations are so great on this substrate, we knew forecasting was really, really critical here, right? So we actually made some modifications and upgrades to our forecasting system to give us better visibility to trend data. And we also upgraded talent and added more talent to our overall forecasting area. We also, with speaking of the whole upgrade area, we reassessed our logistics and 3PL resources so that they would be focusing much quicker on trends we saw in that area. And then lastly, but not least, we launched an e-commerce strategy. E-commerce is a little different from a supply chain standpoint and a logistics standpoint than your traditional full truckloads, I'll ship it, anywhere in the country kind of strategy. So we spent an enormous amount of time with our logistics team mapping out the right e-commerce strategy as well.
So I'd love to follow up on a few things you said, if you don't mind. So you mentioned the fact that you launched during COVID, and then you mentioned forecasting and logistics and e-commerce, and this was all, quite an event for our industry last year. So can you just talk a little bit more about that? Like having to accomplish that during a pandemic and being able to forecast and being able to make sure that you had the available logistics partners, or whether it was, some kind of omni-channel approach. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so from a forecasting standpoint, that was probably our biggest challenge in a pandemic, right? And what we saw was, quite frankly, we saw a pretty big mix shift in our product portfolio. We saw a lot more lids being sold versus historic, because the trends had taken to takeout as restaurants closed. Everything that left the restaurant now had to have a lid on it from a sanitary standpoint. So we actually had to beef up manufacturing and production and sourcing in our lid area to keep up with the demands. Our food container business went nuts. We saw dramatic increases in food containers as well, again, keeping up with the takeout trends. So that was really critical. From a logistics standpoint, we actually saw a lot of traditional full truckload customers switch to LTL because they were all trying to conserve cash during the height of the pandemic. And we understood that. So we actually worked with people as much as we could during the pandemic to help them get through and get back on their feet.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So finally, how do you think we're doing as a supply chain community when it comes to reusing, recycling? Like where are we now? Where are the gaps, and where do you think we can be? Yeah,
I think another great question. I think from a recycling standpoint, I think we're at a real crossroads. We're at a crossroads of infrastructure and personal responsibility. And those two have to kind of meet together if you're really going to have a successful recycling effort and recycle program, right? We believe and wholeheartedly support the whole recycling effort. We think that's needed in our society, but it can't be the only solution. We've got to continue to encourage manufacturers to create relevant innovation that can have different solutions, different end-of-life solutions. So recycling can't be the only weapon out there. So from that standpoint, some products are much easier to recycle than others. I'll give you a story on that. So foam cups, right? It's the world we live in. Very difficult to recycle. If you think about foam cups that end up used and they're in trash receptacles, whether they have iced tea in them or Coca-Cola or soup or whatever. So these products have to be collected. They have to be bagged up. They have to be shipped to some place that has a densifier, and a densifier melts down these products. But before they're densified, they have to be washed and cleaned, and then they're densified. Then they're shipped to a third-party manufacturer to remanufacture that used foam into picture frames or crown molding or bicycle helmets, whatever they're going to go on or go into, and then back out to the supply chain. So if you look at all of that, if you look at the collection, the bagging, the shipping, the washing, the densifying, the reshipping, the remanufacturing, back out, to the supply chain, it's probably a net negative carbon footprint discussion. So that's why we focused so hard on the end-of-life solution on our biodegradable cups called Bio, because once they end up in an active landfill, microbes in the landfill like the taste of the product and they start rushing to the cup and they start breaking it down.
Interesting. So I see we still have a few minutes. If you don't mind, I'd love to go back to something else you mentioned. You talked a little bit about leadership and you're finding the right people to be running your supply chain. The people element of it is obviously something that our members think about a lot. So could you share a little bit of what you learned about that? Why strong supply chain leadership is so important, and then why maybe hiring the right people also is the other side of that.
Yeah, it all starts with getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. The old Jim Collins Good to Great book, whether you're familiar with that or not. But I've always challenged our organization to focus on talent. And if we have the right people on the team, we can accomplish any goal out there. The other thing I've always told my team is I'll never chastise you for making mistakes. That means you're trying. That means you're running really hard at the problem as fast as you can. What I will chastise them for is if they make the same mistake 2 or 3 times, right? Says they're not learning, but everybody has to go through that area. But we at WinCup, we really encourage folks to think outside the box, to run at the problem very fastly, and bring solutions to the table.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the discussion.